Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frauds, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, inspire, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Is it possible? Is cocky Heat fan back? After a 10-game losing streak, they needed a win to cement the recent winning streak. They get it to 6 by beating Boston in Boston, with the Celtics pulling their starters with 4.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, as the Heat now have 6 straight wins by an average of 20.5 points. A team that just acknowledge it. Let's go around. I've got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow Brady Hawk 305. I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow Brady at. You can't follow Greg Sylvander or Brady Hawk. Greg Sylvander at Greg Sylvander. By the way, subscribe to Discord. Links right here in the description. Bypass the Apple upcharge. Alex will fire me if I don't say that. We all left them for dead, right? I mean, we knew they'd make the play-in because there was no way not to make the play-in. But we all left them for dead, correct? Are we agreeing on this?
I think we have to be honest, right?
I mean, I always felt like after they lost 10 in a row, they were going to follow that up with winning 10 in a row. Like I always felt like that was the clear answer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the way they record. They just don't want to have a losing record. I mean, they've been stuck at 41 losses for a long time. Pat hasn't had a lot of losing seasons in his tenure. But they had not beaten a good team in this stretch, with the exception of Golden State, which didn't have Steph. Exactly. And didn't have Jimmy either because he forgot to show up. So they really haven't beaten anybody of any significance until tonight. And this is a significant win, even if this is a Boston team that is locked into a spot itself, and they're going to be the 2 seed. But they've been playing well regardless. And here's what's significant, and we'll get to the player of the game and everything else as we go forward here. What's significant is Erik Spoelstra's settled on a group. Finally. And this is going to make some decisions interesting now going forward. I mean, the first thing he did was he removed Hawkins and Rozier, basically. Okay, so that needed to be done. So you remove the negatives. But Pelle Larsson over the last 3 games has been one of the Heat's best players. One of the Heat's best players. This is not a question of whether or not he leaves the rotation now. It's whether or not he leaves the starting lineup. Because I can make a case for leaving him in there even when Wiggins is there. Now, no Wiggins tonight. No Duncan tonight. We don't know when Duncan's coming back. They've been cryptic about the Wiggins situation also. But they are getting great play from 2 of the guys that they picked up in the Jimmy Butler trade. Davion Mitchell and Kyle Anderson. And we're going to talk a lot about Kyle Anderson tonight because when they made those trades, yes, Kyle Anderson was supposed to be moved. But there were some in the organization, and I know you spotlighted a couple of them tonight, Greg, on Playback. I hope you join us on playback.tv/5RSN, that kind of wanted to keep Kyle Anderson. And I heard similar things, too, at the time. They're like, our scouting staff likes him. We're not necessarily dying to get rid of him. And so we were looking at it as this crisis situation, I think some of us. And then now we're, oh my God, they weren't planning on keeping Kyle Anderson. Now they're stuck with that contract for an additional year. Before we get to the player of the game tonight, because I don't know if it's going to be him. Maybe it was. I don't know. But Greg, he does a lot of the Spo things we kind of felt like once he was on the roster that Spo might fall in love with him, and you can see why.
Exactly. And this isn't even him with a full off season where he gets in Heat shape and what that looks like. He was awesome tonight. Super efficient off the bench. We'll talk more about him in a minute. But it definitely, this is a player that I can see being part of in and out of the rotation is probably the way it'll go, but he's going to get opportunities with Erik Spoelstra. Just to highlight something for everybody so we can at least acknowledge the significance of tonight. I'm looking at wins by month. Boston only lost one game in the month of March, and that was on March 12th to OKC. They won every other game in the month, and this, their first game of April, they lose. It's a huge win for the Heat, 6 straight. I'm not about to sunshine pump and say that they're going to make some sort of playoff run yet. Let's just see how this plays out, but it feels damn good to win in Boston. So for everyone who is looking at the draft pick and the order and wanting them to lose games, anytime you go into Boston and win, that is worth celebrating. So I have to start the show with that.
Well, it's also possible they could be seeing them in the first round, right? That's not inconceivable because the 8th seed is there for you. I don't think that he can get the 7. We've discussed this on a couple of episodes. And the issue with that is that you have Orlando and Atlanta playing each other twice. So unless there's a sweep of that, well, I'm sorry, this is a split of that and the Heat move way up. It's going to be hard to catch a team for 7th, I think. But they could get 8, and then they could win the 8-7 game because Orlando and Atlanta are not that good. So you could potentially, and neither of them have great home crowds. Both of those places get taken over by Heat fans. So could you win a 7-8 matchup and then you're getting Boston in the first round? I'll go to you. Then they need to get the player of the game. Alex, for $100. Do you want the Boston Celtics again in the first round?
Oh, man. You know what? Not a tough question. No, I think I've had enough of that. For as much as I enjoy the Heat Celtics matchups as a theory, I'm very good on the idea of us having to go through a bunch of Boston fans taking over the Kaseya Center and then chanting in the hallways, much like the Knicks fans were recently. Like, I'm just sick of that experience. For some reason, the Heat can never beat them at home, but love to go up there and beat them in Boston when that's considered to be like one of the tougher places to play. So no, I'm good on that. We already got that last season. If they're going to make the playoffs, do it against the Cavs. And then some of us, you know, on the network or some of the fans maybe can convince themselves that they can maybe put up a real fight against the Cavs. I'm good on the whole Boston thing. I'm done with that.
I'm with you on that part of it. I really don't want to deal with Celtics fans. Then again, I may travel, and if I have to travel, that means traveling back to Cleveland. And you know, I had to spend
free
a year in
lobster
Cleveland.
that they give the media in Boston it might be worth it.
Oh, no, they do. Although Cleveland has the best chicken wings in the country. I'm telling you, they're better than Buffalo wings in Buffalo. Like in Cleveland, I forget what they're called, Quaker State or something like that. It's not motor oil. It's like they are the best chicken. You get them in India and you get them in Cleveland. So I might be okay with it. I don't think they're beating either of those teams in the postseason. But I will say this, okay? This is the craziest thing we've seen since 30-11. Like that one went from 11-30 to 30-11 with a magnet being 500. And now we're looking at a 10-game losing streak followed by a 6-game winning streak. And if they can extend the winning streak to 12, the magnet would be 500. And I do think that at this point, even if you don't agree with the organizational philosophy of them always pushing forward, and I heard Eric Reed kind of pushing that philosophy tonight in the third quarter, even if you don't agree with it, I do think that for all the guff that we've given Erik Spoelstra this year, I think some credit has to be given to him for keeping this thing together after a 10-game losing streak where literally we were looking at the schedule and saying they may not win another game. And not only have they won another game, but it's not just that they've gotten this play from Davion Mitchell and Kyle Anderson, but they've also gotten 2 of their young players. I know Ware had some difficulties tonight. We'll talk about it. But 2 of their young players, Ware and Larsson, are playing a big role in this, even though Hawkes is not, and they don't have Jovic. And so I do think that's impressive. All right, let's go to player of the night. We're going to let Brady jump in on this.
And now it's time for the A Aggressive Insurance Player of the Night, sponsored by our friend Lynette. You can find her at insurancebylynette.com. That's with 2 N's and 2 T's, insurancebylynette.com. If you need car insurance, renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, or any other type of insurance, she's the person to go to. Based in Lauderhill, she services the entire Tri-County area here in South Florida, and she will make sure to get you the best deal. She'll probably talk to you about the Heat while you're at it. Reach out to her, insurancebylynette.com. And now, the player of the game.
All right, Brady, you got some options tonight.
Yeah, this was the most like spread around stat sheet that you're going to see in a long time. Like I felt like this was just the most all around effort. Like when people say about just kind of getting it from just everybody in the rotation, this was kind of the definition of that. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to give it to Kyle Anderson. I just feel like when the game was in the balance, when Boston made their real run where they cut it and got it down to like 4 or 5, when it felt like if they even got it to 2 or even at that point, it felt like the game was going to be over. Like it didn't feel like Miami was going to be able to counter a comeback after having that type of performance. But every time Boston had a punch, Kyle Anderson came through with a counter punch. Like no matter what in that third quarter, whether it was driving, getting to the line, mid-range pull-ups. He was giving Caleb Martin, Gabe 7 flashbacks. His shot fake is just one of the funniest things in the world because he has such a slow jumper that like when he slowly rolls into a shot fake, it looks believable. Like it literally looks like he's shooting his jumper and he gets all these guys off their feet. Like it's really hilarious. I just thought the way he settled them. Like, look, they're in some of these lineups here. Like, yes, Boston was without some guys. Miami not having Wiggins, I thought was huge in this type of matchup specifically. So, like, that's even more impressive to me. But they're in some of these lineups where there's not really a ton of scoring. It's Davion Mitchell, it's Haywood, it's Kyle Anderson. It's like kind of like these lineups where Kyle Anderson was put in a position where it's not what he's usually asked to do. It wasn't the usual role player stuff at the 4. It was like, you're a wing creator. We're going to need you to run a couple pick and rolls, run handoffs, be the short roll guy, be the the mid-range scorer. And I just felt like he answered every call. I mean, 19 points, 7 of 11 shooting, 4 for 4 from the line. And he was really good defensively. I think as a whole, we're going to talk about how good they were defensively in this game. I thought as a team, this was one of their best defensive performances of the season. But he was one of the proponents of that. So I just felt like there's a lot of guys we can mention for this. I mean, Tyler at 25, I think Pella's probably the story of the night just because of what they're leaning into. But Kyle Anderson was a player of the game to me, just with the counter punches he threw at them.
Well, I think on Hero, who we should mention, wasn't his most efficient shooting night, not like it's been lately, but he gave him 9 assists in addition to the 25
turnovers.
points, 6 rebounds, 0 turnovers. Right. And when you look back at Boston and the series last year when he didn't have Jimmy, there was one game he was brilliant, which Spoelstra called the best game of his career. I remember asking Tyler about it afterwards, and he kind of seemed a little annoyed by that. But the other he was just annoyed by me. Or the other four games though were a struggle for him with the kind of coverages that he saw. And tonight he made the right decisions in those coverages, which I think is big. Also, Bam. I know they got away from him for periods of the game, but he hit a big sort of baseline shot, like an old UD. I think you mentioned it was a UD type shot. Yeah. That when the game was starting to get away a little bit, made a big bucket. But I want to pivot here. And Highsmith gave him 10 off the bench, which I thought mattered in 26 minutes. Mitchell was great, I thought. 34 minutes off the bench, 13 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. Give him the contract. Get him back here. I don't think there should be any question about this, that he should be back next season. But I want to get into Larsson a little more, okay? But I know we want to do that on Play of the Night, right? So let's do that. So let's do Play of the Night, and we'll get into Pelle Larsson.
And now it's time for the X-Ray of the Play of the Day, brought to us by our friends over at Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. Nelson and his team will bring the X-ray equipment and the staffing to you if you work in a hospital or a medical office. Get a consultation today at c-armandstaffing.com or give them a call at 561-891-9620. Their fleet of trucks at your service. Again, it's Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services, 561-891-9620. And now, the X-Ray of the Play of the Day.
I want to make sure I give Mitchell enough credit. Second on the team in minutes tonight off the bench. So even though he's not starting, played 34 minutes, and he just plays with a different energy than a lot of guys that we've seen on this team this year, and they do feed off of it. It's just like collect a few of those. That's kind of what they need. And I think his energy and Kyle Anderson's IQ are two things that we're missing from this team for good portions of the season. All right, let's get to the actual play of the night. I don't know, Greg, Alex, which do you want to handle it? I think we mentioned Larsson, right? Greg, you mentioned Larsson initially on our thread. Was it you?
Absolutely. Pelle Larsson put Torrey Craig on a poster. I thought that was one of the more fun plays of the night, but also him scoring and kind of, I don't want to go too far with him kind of sizing up Boston, and I don't know, was it Tatum that he did?
Yep.
That he sized up?
Yes.
So that's a fun moment, and it shows that the rookie has no fear. So those jump out as plays of the night for a guy who I know that, like, when you look at the stats tonight, Kyle Anderson in 25 minutes, or what is it, 23 minutes, 19 points. Bam and Tyler are their usual selves. Pele was the story because he's kind of the connective tissue of a lot of stuff. And he was just going at these guys. Like, he just is not intimidated at all. It reminds me of the mentality that Goran had when he played, to a degree. We've said that before. It was a great night from Pele.
I've talked about this a lot. Very first night in the locker room when he got minutes and they played against DeRozan when it was Sacramento was in town. And Larsson was complaining that you couldn't guard him because he gets every call. And I'm like, DeMar DeRozan's been an all-star. He's a borderline Hall of Famer. And Larsson was not showing a lot of respect. And I respected the hell out of that. He just, from the very beginning, like, he has guarded these guys. They've thrown him in there. And I know someone gave me credit for this on Twitter, and I know everybody says I'm pushing it too far. He's not going to be this guy long term, but he's got so much Goran in him. He loves contact. He loves contact. When he lowers the shoulder, gets towards the basket, the shot. If the shot comes along this offseason, they've really got something. It's just they got to get consistency with the shot. But I don't think he's as. We did a whole episode on Jaime versus Larsson, and obviously Spo's made that decision already for this season. We'll see where it goes long term. We talked about in the episode, but the one thing I think about Larsson that's different than Jaime, maybe I'll be wrong about this. He doesn't seem as scoutable as Jaime was. I don't feel like there's like, because, and Brady, to that point, the off the ball stuff, which we talked about, it's there every night with him. In a way, it was at times with Hawkins last year, but it wasn't this year, not consistently. But I just, is there a way you think that his effectiveness will be diminished going forward as more teams start to see him? Because he's filling up the box score every night, and he's defending.
I mean, as you said, the shot is kind of a big part of it, but I just don't think his shot is far off, like, at all. Like, I really think a lot of it is confidence with him. He has good form. It's just about, like, little mechanic stuff, and I think that it's so easy to turn around in an offseason. When you talk about scoutable, I mean, Jaime just had certain moves and certain go-tos and certain spots on the floor that he liked where teams could kind of push him out of those areas, where Pella is just kind of everywhere. Like, he doesn't have a specific area. He's just so chaotic, but in a good way. Like, he's just kind of all over the place with his attacks, as you said. I think one of the biggest things is, I mean, teams are going to just say, if you ever see him go into the basket, make sure you jump straight up and don't foul, because he is legitimately, as you said, with Goran kind of looking for contact, he is embracing contact. Like, I don't think I've ever seen him, like, shoot a floater in open space. Like, he takes that open space right into the chest of your defender, and he's going to try to draw a foul. I mean, he had 7 free throw attempts, like, in the first quarter tonight.
Yeah.
That's not normal for a guy that's not getting a ton of minutes in the season, that comes in as a second-round rookie, and he's all of a sudden getting the respect of officials. It's not really a respect factor. Teams are fouling him because he's just a bulldog going to the basket. So, no, he's – and the other big difference, I mean, not to compare him to Jaime totally, but what he's doing defensively, I mean, he is just a straight-up good positional defender. It was always going to come down to him fouling less, and it's been a real positive over this recent stretch that he has not gotten, playing major minutes. He hasn't gotten in a lot of foul trouble. He is guarded straight up. He's played positionally. He's guarded everybody. He's guarded up. He's guarded down. He's guarded the stuff he was doing to Tatum with some of these contests. Like, he's just done a good job on both sides of the ball. And he's just fitting in right now.
So, speaking of fitting in, and then we're going to get to defending the house, because I know we want to spend a little time on the defense tonight. But if you're Spoelstra, Wiggins plays when he comes back, right? Like, that's we're assuming that plugs into the 3, gets his minutes. That doesn't really disturb much. Does Duncan? Does Nico? Now, these were guys that fans were calling for to play more. I remember when we had games that he didn't go back. Was it the Sacramento game on the road that Spoelstra didn't play them in the overtimes, and it was a crisis. And now they're winning without these guys. And for a long time they were losing without Nico. So this is not the whole causation thing that I talk about. But Alex, what do you do with the two of them when they're healthy? Because they're not going to tell us when they're going to be healthy. But Nico's close, from what I've heard. Duncan is really hard to tell right now, and Wiggins is hard to tell also, but Nico's close. So what? What do you do?
This one is a tough question actually, because I do think it depends on their health, right? So like the Duncan back thing, for example, like that's something that would concern me, and that's just from the outside looking in, just because it's a back thing, right? And he that was the thing with him last season. Was it last season when he had like the back thing at the end of the season? So yeah, and he's on the other side of 30 now, so it's one of those things where it's like, is this something that's just going to keep getting worse for him, that's going to keep popping up? You don't want that to be the case, but if specifically when he first comes back, maybe he doesn't play right away. But absolutely, like just based off of what we've seen from them, Duncan and Jovic deserve to be rotation players. I just think it really depends on, does Spo believe that they're good to go, good to go back into more or less a similar role that they were in before. I think Duncan plugs in pretty nicely into the Burks starting spot, and I've liked what Burks has given them for sure. I'm not saying bench him and never play him again, but Duncan was that starter before Burks came in there, and I think he kind of has the cachet there with the Heat, just knowing what they can get to with him. And if they really want to, when those guys are back, let's say you have Wiggins back in that time as well, like they can run a 10-man rotation, and they're still and they're playing all their quote unquote main guys. The thing is, it seems like they've added a couple more main guys over the past couple of weeks. Like all of a sudden, Larsson, Anderson, and Burks are all like, okay, you want them all to play. Whereas before they were kind of like all like more or less on the outside looking in, like you weren't sure how consistent they were going to be as far as minutes every night. Now, like all three of those guys, you want them to play. And I would think that if they're healthy, you'd want Duncan and Jovic to play too. So they can theoretically throw out, like, I think this team can throw out 10, and you're not really throwing out guys who haven't earned it, as some of the commenters are saying here. And you guys mentioned there earlier, like getting, Terry and Jaquez out of the rotation, it's done some things for them, man. It really has. It's hard to not talk about that, because those were the guys that were, negative in the eye test, negative with the on and off data, and here we are. And then it's not only that you're not playing them, it's that the guys that are playing instead of them and have been getting more minutes lately are really popping off. So I do think, like, maybe I'm copping out of the answer here, but I think they can play 10. I think they can play 10 with these guys. And I do think Jovic and Duncan are not guys who, if they're healthy, should be on the outside looking in.
I wonder if you got all the guys to be honest this season, how frustrating it's been for some. Now, some of these guys just joined the team recently, but how frustrating it's been for some to watch guys getting heavy minutes this season who just were constant negatives. Because I just know they're not going to talk about it publicly, but it's always said after the fact, teams a year or two down the road, well, if this coach hadn't played this guy so much, if he played this guy sooner. And the counter I always make to that is that Spoelstra, over time, tends to play guys when they're ready to play. So there's this chicken or the egg kind of thing. It's like, well, are they playing better now because they had to wait and he had to make them earn it, or would they have been playing better before and Spo should have just made the change earlier? I think this was one of the few seasons where I lean towards he just should have made the damn changes earlier, because it was just so obvious, not just to us, but I can tell you to many in the front office, that Terry Rozier should have been out of the rotation in November. Okay. And Jaquez, I think there was more patience with, even though his contract is not with Rozier's, because there was such hope about him for last year. And again, they viewed him as an asset in a bunch of ways, and they expected a pop this year, and it didn't happen. Terry, they were kind of just hoping, okay, could he get back to the level he was prior to the neck injury? It never happened. And I think other things have come in here, confidence, role, maybe off the court, who knows? Okay. But he's just been consistently bad. But I just wonder, like, how many more wins would they have had if he had gone to Larsson sooner? I know fans are going to say, and Burke sooner, and some of these other guys sooner who have performed really well in these roles. I don't know. I feel like Burks could have done this all year because he's just who he is. Larsson maybe needed a little bit of time to watch, but I also don't think he would have been overwhelmed by anything that they saw right now. But Larsson's been a huge plus for them. And I said the other night, I said, right now, if you were to rank their young guys going forward, and I don't include Bam and Tyler because they're both 25 plus at this stage. It's nice to have guys in that tier. But I mean, I think Ware has the biggest upside still. I still say Jovic second, but Larsson's making me think, and I think Jaquez at this stage is fourth. I just think that's where we're at right now after this season. All right, let's get to defending the house.
And now it's time for our Defending the House segment, sponsored by our friends over at The Real Estate Shop. You can find them at realestateshopfl.com. That's with 2 P's and an E, realestateshopfl.com, or at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. This is Javier Iglesias and Amanda Martin. They help buyers and sellers in real estate. They're nimble and protective of their clients. They service the entire Tri-County area. That's Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties with a proven on-market strategy. The Real Estate Shop sellers earn the most money in the shortest time frame because Amanda and Javier have a deep understanding of the local market. So check them out. Again, it's at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram, realestateshopfl.com, or give them a call at 954-268-9812. And now, who defended the house?
By the way, I like this comparison in the comments here. And Greg, you might have made it before because I always say the Dragic thing, but there's some who are comparing Larsson to Dan Marley.
Oh, yeah.
And
I love that.
I see a little of that, but it's more Marley's early career because by the time that Dan got to Miami, he was pretty limited physically at that point. He was more of a 3-point bomber, which is not Larsson's game. But early in his career, people forget, just like they forget with Mike Miller, by the way, that Dan was athletic as hell.
It's the defense and the
really,
toughness, I think, is what they're drawing from. Yeah.
Exactly. But I anytime you can compare somebody to Thunder Dan, that's a very, very good thing. By the way, Brady and Alex, he was a player who played for the Heat in the late 90s. Anyway, we won't do that.
I know all about Thunder Dan. I use him all the time on 2K.
That's right. By the way, the only restaurant downtown Phoenix. Did you know this pretty much? That like if you go to some cities on the West Coast, I'm not talking about California, but some of the other ones, or sort of the West, Southwest, like you can't find anything downtown. So Marley's is the only spot that you can go to downtown Phoenix. It's like down the street from the arena. All right. Anyway, defending the house. Who wants to jump in on this? Because I know Brady, you said you want to talk defense tonight, so you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was one of their better defensive games of the season. As you said, they've kind of knocked it down to an 8-man rotation here, and it's just a lot of good defenders in the rotation. Like you're just basically, they were pretty untraditional tonight defensively. Like they didn't do a lot of their usual things. Like it wasn't as much zone, obviously, because they would light them up from 3. There was more switching than they usually do with that starting lineup, where people at the start of the game were like, Kalel's really struggling inside because Kornet was just killing them inside. But on the flip side, it's like Kornet's killing them inside, and Miami will kind of allow that because they're overly limiting Boston's, good threes. So it's turning into Kornet layups, and it's like, yeah, that'll eventually level out. But with that said, with Kalel kind of having that struggling inside, he was so good on the perimeter in this game. Like I on multiple occasions, just kind of the way he was containing Tatum and different guys when he would switch out, and he was staying down, staying grounded, never got off his feet. Late contest because he's just such a lengthy defender where he could late contest, and it's really just kind of right on the money where he can kind of side contest your 3-ball. He was just really good in that area. Pella, as I said before, he was switching all over the place. He's so physical. He really just gets into you in general that there's just he just kind of gets you annoyed. Just one of those like pesty defenders where like he just bothers you. The real interesting part, I think one of the real storylines of this game is the bench was just so good. And it's been good for a while. I mean, Davion and Haywood linked lineups have been good for even when they were losing games. It was kind of one of their bright spots. But what you're seeing right now from those two guys defensively, Davion being as small as he is and being able to guard bigger wings is just one of the most interesting things they can do, where like they have Tatum in the mid to low block and nobody's helping. They're like, Davion's strong enough to deal with that. He'll contest that. Haywood, we know what he can do defensively. Kyle Anderson, he could really move around, and guard up at certain times. I just thought they were all over the place defensively. They were forcing turnovers. Celtics only shooting 28% from 3. Literally, Miami has 2 more threes made on 13 less attempts. Like, they just outshot Boston, which is not something that you would have thought would have happened heading into this game. But I just thought defensively, they did a good job of it. And like, as much as I felt like Boston was getting a lot of friendly whistles in this game, I mean, they only ended up with 16 free throw attempts to Miami's 27. I just thought Miami was the better attacking team. They had more opportunities to get to the line. And Miami just did a really good job, containing. And by the way, off the turnovers, they're just doing a better job than they have in the past of converting in the open break and just making them pay. Like, there was the one where Tyler had a clear opportunity off the steal to kind of shoot one of those pull-up transition threes that he always takes. And he turned that into a real strong take, and he laid it in with the left over Derek White. And that's the type of development you're kind of seeing right now. It's like they're just not settling. I just felt like in this game, they weren't settling at all. They weren't gambling a lot defensively. They were just kind of doing the right things. They played their game. It was just impressive. And I will say Davion has to be, even though we mentioned the players of the game and how good Pelle is, I mean, that guy just bulldozes you to the basket. The pull-up threes, like everybody talking about his three-point shot, and the way he's kind of stepping in these pull-up and spot-up threes consistently, like he gets put in with 6 minutes, into the game, and he doesn't get taken out the rest of the half. And we kind of expected that with Spo, like would just never want to take him out. But what he's doing defensively, but really specifically, like making them pay offensively, where it's like, why would you take this guy off? He's serviceable offensively, and he's doing what he's doing on the other end of the floor. So credit to him, and just credit to Miami defensively.
It didn't pay off right away, obviously, with a 10-game losing streak. And I know our expectations. The fans are getting all excited again. It's funny to watch this. It really is, because everybody was rooting for them to lose. And now it's like everybody's getting drunk. There's going to be a hangover when you don't get the pick that you want, but that's all right. Enjoy the high, okay, while you can get it. I mean, that's pretty much where everybody's at right now. But the one thing we did say at the trade deadline was, even though it was really Andy and Nick who executed the Jimmy trade, okay, I don't know if people realize that they were primary in executing the Jimmy trade. They made a trade for Spo. They made a trade to settle the locker room, bring in guys who they vetted personality-wise, Wiggins, Davion, and Kyle Anderson, who would fit with the group. I know people laughed at that at the time, but Spo needed a break from everything that was going on. So they brought in 3 guys who've never had any difficulty with any teammates, anything behind the scenes. They've all been known as great team guys. Golden State didn't want to lose Wiggins. Toronto didn't want to lose Davion Mitchell. Kyle Anderson, if you look at, like, Minnesota fans still love Kyle Anderson. Like, these are 3 players who absolutely ingratiated themselves to fan bases, teammates, organizations. They all play hard. They play smart. Okay, for the most part, especially Anderson, he's just extremely high IQ. The Boris Diaw comparison is absolutely apt in the way that he plays. And of course, he came up in the Spurs system. But they got players for Spo, and it seems like it just took him a little while to kind of figure it out and to get away from his tendencies earlier in the season. And I mean, they're kind of fun right now. They are. They're kind of fun in the way that they're playing. They're literally blowing teams out. I'll finish with this, okay? Does anybody remember the 11-30 to 30-11? Like how this happened? Do you remember where they were? 11-30. Andy's on the road. He calls Pat and says, maybe we should just blow this thing up. Okay. So let's meet when we get back. Okay, not their tendency. And then they won 3 straight games and the meeting never happened. Right? Because that's who they are. They're just going to keep trying to push, whether it's smart, not smart. They ended up not making the playoffs because Dion Waiters sprained his ankle in the last week and a half of the season. Otherwise, they missed by 1 game. If Dion plays, I believe they probably make the playoffs that year.
Who they get in that draft?
Everybody's pissed off, and they ended up getting Bam. And they ended up getting Bam. Okay, so they didn't cheat the karma gods and all the stuff that Spo says, and they end up getting a foundational player for them going forward. And when they went through all that, it's like Spo found a system and a group halfway through the season. And all the guys who weren't playing well earlier, he tweaked it. They won 13 straight games with Okaro White starting at the 4. Okay? And basically a drive-in kick game with Dragic and Waiters and James Johnson handling from the front court and Whiteside not getting in the way too much. Like, they found a game with that team. And it's like Spo, with like a week and a half left of the regular season, has found a game. I would be loath to make a lot of changes now. I think you plug in Wiggins, and I think you just let it ride.
Yeah,
and you just see where it goes.
I think that until they meet adversity again, that although Duncan and who's the other player that we were? Oh, and Nico
Jovic,
are rightfully deserving of rotation spots. I think Spo is going to integrate them slowly.
Mike T says he's on here all the time. That's Heat legend Okaro White to you. I just remember, like, they could not lose with Okaro White playing that we never heard from Okaro White. Who's the
like they were 11-30, like in that anecdote that you mentioned, and they were questioning whether to blow up that team. 11-30, and then like they ended up being like rewarded for that with the 30-11 on the other end of it. Like that's just so funny.
Right.
And it really explains why they are the way they are. Like that's definitely a part of it.
No, there's no doubt. It's like there are kind of psychos about this stuff, and sometimes it really doesn't make sense. But it's like it's their philosophy, and they're going to stick with it. Well, that was the mistake. The mistake was paying them in 17, and we don't need to go through all of that. Dion Waiters on a 1-year, $2.7 million contract was genius. Okay. The next year, not so genius.
Okay, not when he was extended. Why they had to why they didn't have cap space for Jimmy and had to trade. So it's just funny how like all this stuff it
all plays together, and it's going. And Alex, it's going to again. But I remember walking by, and I'll finish with this. I remember being in Palm Beach. You were there too, but I remember walking by Pat, and he was sitting there in the hallway arguing with James Johnson's agent about James Johnson's conditioning when he came into camp. And I'm like, oh, they shouldn't have extended any of these guys. Oh, why did they do that? So anyway, you just, again, at this time, you just enjoy it. And we're glad we had so many on with us. It's probably our biggest audience in a long time. That's why the four of us wanted to be on. Tomorrow, Memphis is in town. Alex and Brady will be there. Actually, Greg, I'm going to join you in the post game because I will be home. So you, me, and Adele, I believe, tomorrow. Be on post game, likely go live there as well. Thanks to everybody for joining. Thanks to all the comments. Thanks to our sponsors, c-armandstaffing.com, real estate shop, fl.com, insurancebyLynette.com. Prize Picks, use the code 5FIVE and subscribe to Off the Floor. Link is right here in the description. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.